Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of the Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Southwest Virginia fishing report with Matt Reilly. How you doing, Matt?
Doing great, Marvin. How are you?
As always, just trying to stay out of trouble, and I guess the question is, do you think we're finally done with the summer heat?
I would say we're probably pretty close, I always talk about it. October and frankly, as of late, the rest of the fall can be kind of a wild card temperature wise. But we're definitely seeing a couple of, kind of big cold fronts looming in the future that will probably knock our, summertime kind of seasonal fishing back a little bit. But, we were close to 90 today down in Southwest Virginia, Northeast Tennessee. And I think it's supposed to stay that way until at least the weekend and then start dropping back down into the 70s. So I think we're going to get some respite here, but, hard to say past the next week or two.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me. I think our forecast and your forecast are kind of the same, and I'm kind of curious how we're going to get that big drop in temperature without some massive rain event, but we'll see.
Yeah, and this time of year we're still in hurricane tropical storm season, so they can pop up pretty quick and change the forecast pretty quick. So we'll get what we get. You just have to react to it.
Yeah. And so, on the smallmouth bite, right, as we kind of get to the end of the summer fishing, what should anglers expect as we see those fish start to kind of transition from kind of that traditional kind of topwater summer bite to starting to basically figure out where they want to hang out all winter?
Yeah. So you look at it from two different angles. One angle is kind of fish behavior, and another is presentation and approach. From the fish behavior standpoint, if we have low water, it's still fairly warm. From a fish behavior standpoint, once we get a couple of these big cold fronts around the end of September, early October, they will start to move a little bit. And that is not to say that they're, going to embark on this big seasonal route or migration, but what they probably will do and usually do is kind of disassociate from these spots that particularly the bigger dominant fish will kind of set up shop in over the course of the summer. Those fish will start to kick around a little bit, very similar to the movement in the springtime where they kind of exit winter holes and start shuffling around in the river and positioning themselves somewhat aggressively, just trying to bulk up. The fall is another instinct-driven feeding time because they start to feel these big cold fronts and photo period shortening, and they know winter's coming. So they've got to feed quite a bit. From a tactic, approach, presentation standpoint, it's possible that not much will change, and it just kind of depends on the weather and the conditions. But if we continue to have fairly warm, low, clear water, bug fishing will continue to be an option. But as water temperatures drop, those fish are, they have that kind of instinct that they need to pack on some weight fairly quickly. And as the water temperatures drop, it kind of frees them up metabolically a little bit to go out and chase their food around a little bit more. So sometime in the month of October, we'll start to see a shift in particularly the bigger fish's, kind of preference to more bait fishy, kind of active retrieve. And that'll carry us through, the fall, just like the spring. We're kind of following it backwards, from these kind of aggressive, feeding locations, eating, active presentations, and just slowly slowing down and moving closer and closer to holes and, big protected pieces of water with minimal current and stuff like that. So, but we still have, probably 5-6 weeks of good fishing in front of us for both the guy that wants to chuck a bug and fish pretty visually for a big fish, and the guys that want to get out and hunt around with a streamer too.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, like other places kind of in the mid-Atlantic and southeast, that the trout bite's just going to keep getting better. It hasn't quite been cold enough to really knock off the terrestrial game, but we're starting to see probably some of those kind of traditional fall hatches that we like, caddis and things like that.
Yeah, certainly, early fall is kind of a sweet spot in the sense that water temperatures start dropping, and but you still have a lot of those terrestrials kicking around. So the beetle and ant and hopper fishing, and the big bushy, stimulator humpy fishing will continue to stay pretty good until, it's usually probably the middle of October before we start getting some frost. And really haven't been doing a whole lot of that this summer because it's been fairly dry and fairly warm. But we'll start having some pretty good trout fishing, and that'll just stay on all through the winter, as a good option.
Yeah. And we've got a question from Luke, and it's really about fishing new water and, exploring. And he was kind of curious to get your thoughts on, how long you should fish a particular stretch of water before you're like, I don't think there are any fish here. It's time to go somewhere else.
Yeah. That's a little bit of a it depends, answer and question, but I would say, foremost, understand what you're fishing for, so realistically, these are extreme examples, but if you're fishing bluegill in a farm pond and you chuck a popper out there for 2 hours and don't catch fish, you should probably leave, because you should have a few fish to hand, or at least have seen a few in that interval of time. On the flip side, if you're out muskie fishing, on the New River in January, and you don't see a fish for 2 hours, it's kind of a normal day. So understand where you're fishing, time of year, smallmouth in the summer versus smallmouth in the early spring, winter, late fall kind of scenario. It's all just going to depend. But I would say, a lot of fishing comes down to confidence too. If you feel like you should be catching fish after weighing all of those options, or all of those factors, give it a sound effort, and then consider going somewhere else. But always, especially if there's a lot at stake, I have a little bit of a story with a stream that I used to fish quite a bit. Always heard about this river having all these big brown trout in it, and how it was just, littered with them. And I bet I fished that river 2 or 3 times under kind of average to low water conditions, in the spring, summer, fall. Caught a couple of fish, but nothing that I thought really lined up with its reputation. And I almost wrote it off, but I was sitting around one day in February, and we had some pretty high but dropping water, and warming trend, kind of late winter. And I said to myself, knowing a brown trout, a day like today is going to be the day that you're going to be able to go get them, particularly a bigger fish. And if I go fishing today and don't see anything, don't catch anything, then I might not ever go back. And it ended up being one of the better, mountain stream brown trout days I've ever had. So it pays to consider the habits of the fish and how they line up with the conditions, and, kind of the reputation, if there is one, of the water that you're fishing, and then just kind of use your best judgment. There's no sense in fishing someplace over and over and over again if you're not getting anything. But on the flip side, musky fishing or et cetera, sometimes that's what it takes, and it's just going to be a longer interval before you decide to leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah, there you go. And, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email them to us. You can DM us on social media if we use your question. I will send you some articulate fly swag, and you're drawing for something cool from that at the end of the season. And, we're getting to the end of your smallmouth season, but I imagine you're ramping up for muskie. You want to let folks know kind of what you have available and how to reach out to you and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, we're booked out pretty much. Have some trout dates here and there, but pretty much looking at November for, your muskie, your mountain stream trout, your, big tailwater trout streamer fishing endeavors. That's what we'll pretty much fill, most of the latter half of October, November, December, January, February with. So if those are the kinds of things you're interested in, if you're a conventional angler or a streamer angler, now's your time for a variety of species. So if you'd like to get a hold of me, the website's MattReillyFlyFishing.com, and all my contact info's on there, and look forward to hearing from you.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, folks, you owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Matt.
Thanks, Marvin.